and the stories behind laboratory medicine. So I'm Stat Stephanie.
I'm Odie.
No, Melody.
And today we're going to be talking about burnout and moral injury. And we want to put a little bit of a different spin on it because what does it really take to stay in laboratory medicine? I mean, so many people are being dramatic in a certain about a way, but there is some honesty in the level of pressure and the level of phone calls and the high volume of work and the high volume of documentation that we do that contributes to burnout. But some of this, we're acting as our own enemies. So we just really want to dive into, why good people are getting tired and what might help with the entire situation.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say, like, the intention of this episode is not to be a new year, new you type of conversation or even like a wellness checklist. I think we just want to have like a real conversation. I mean, social media is full of healthcare professionals ragging on the job, right? And saying like it's terrible and we're all miserable and we need better things. And there's some truth within that. But like, can we look at it from a 30,000 foot view and maybe some strategies and we can make it better?
Agreed. And we're not here to be like, hi, my name is, as a support group, I am a burnout laboratory scientist. But this is going to be more like, let's name what lab professionals are actually experiencing and talk about it. We're all about action. So let's get to it.
Let's do it.
Very detail oriented. We understand how to get stuff done. Checklists, OCD, procedures, everything. We can adapt, we can problem solve, and we can carry a lot silently because our entire job is about multitasking and making sure that, our physicians have what they need, that our administrators have what we need, the patients, the machines, everybody has what they need. See, whatever regulatory agency, there's documentation. But I'm going to ask you guys, why do you think, you both work in labs like I do, why do you think the lab tends to absorb, it seems like, stress without saying anything about it? There's so many well-documented programs. In our hospital, we've got a code lavender for our clinical team when they're feeling stressed out or they have a particularly difficult situation. So it's very evident the suicide rates, unfortunately, for other professions or the burnout rates for other service lines like nursing or pharmacists. But why do you think it almost seems like we tend to silently absorb our stress and we're kind of like the unsqueaky wheels of this, of this situation?
I can jump in first. So I feel like it's something that a lot of people, as you start school and then you get your first job, that you kind of make what you make, just with what you have, you try to make the most with that. We're always about, or initially when I was entering the field, it was like, okay, we'll try to find a workaround, try to find something to kind of keep things moving because you don't want to ask for more. You feel like, you're given what you need, so you need to kind of show that you're able to rise to that. But over time, it's been something, especially working in quality and process improvement, that you realize, no, it's based on the systems that are around you. And you've got to be able to speak up to some of those and be able to look at those and evaluate those. But fresh out of school, you don't want to, it's your new job, you don't want to be that squeaky wheel. You want to be kind of keep going, oh yeah, no, I can keep up with the workload. No, I'm not exhausted. No, yeah, I can do this. I can come in at 4 a.m. and then take on 2 extra interviews in a day. So for me, it's just something that I think we've kind of ingrained in ourselves a little bit, but have to break out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think too, there's this idea of the way that we practice and the way that we care for patients is behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And so within that, the emotional load isn't always visible to others. And so, they might hear it on the phone in your tone. They might see it when you're like running through the halls with the cooler for a trauma that needs a rare unit, right? Like they might see you in these brief moments. Or for example, when there's a issue and, we have to reroute testing or something, right? Like they see you in moments of crisis. In that moment of crisis, you have to have a cool head because you're problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like it's not the time for you to be like, oh, I hate my life. It's just not the time, right? And so no one really notices when things go right with the laboratory because it's a well-oiled machine. Diagnostics are getting out. People are doing the jobs that they need to do with the data that we're turning out, and with their collaboration with us. But then when things go wrong and the pressures are intense, it's like, well, why isn't, what about the lab? Like, why isn't the lab doing what they're supposed to do? And it can get very defensive for a laboratory person in that moment. Think about like this, just the surgeon calling like 6 times because, you don't have enough tissue or something. Like those are the types of things that can really, like the clinical team is upset. That you're trying to do your job. But you're trying to make the right diagnosis and you're trying to care for that patient too, because that's your patient too. And that's not always seen. And so I think that's the challenge. Like, how do you go through those emotions and feelings in a healthy way without getting resentful toward other teams? And I would add too, and then I'll like shut up when you talk about something else. But like I would add too that I think because of how complex our world is, trying to explain that to someone who's not in our world is very challenging. And so there's a frustration because, for example, if risk and regulatory is trying to help you, they could think they're helping you, but they're not really helping you because they don't understand the expansiveness of what you're trying to talk about, or the downstream ramifications of that. It's not that simple to just put it on a different analyzer, for example. So I think there's frustration there too, and then it just kind of compounds.
Yeah, that invisibility part really matters, and over time it does add up. And I can remember, trying to explain to IT, when we have an LIS downtime, every hour equals 2 hours for us to recover, and trying to just figure out ways to put that, like you said, expansiveness in terms that other people can understand the weight of things going wrong. Because like you said, nobody is recognizing the thousands of tests that went out with great turnaround times. They recognize that, that 2 hour downtime or that, delay in that one sample that people are yelling about. But even further than that, because we know and we hear the word burnout a lot, but I do want to pause and bring in another term that we hear less about, and that is moral injury. And working in the lab, it's a very real thing. It's much as burnt out. Burnout is what happens when we're exhausted or we're overly stressed, and we sustain that stress for long periods of time, then you get burnt out. But moral injury happens when you want to provide good quality laboratory care to your patients, to your clinicians, and for whatever reason, because of your systems, because of your instrumentation, because of your policies and procedures, just because of inefficiencies within your lab, you can't deliver that quality care that you want to. And then it starts to weigh on you morally because you know what you should be providing, but you can't because of these systems behind you. And so we want to kind of fold that into the conversation too, because that continues to stack on, and it's a real thing also.
It does. I wanted to just quickly go back, Melody, when you were talking about how the lab doesn't really, until other services see why isn't the lab doing what they're supposed to do. A lot of people don't realize that if you actually communicate when things are down and what they're not working to the other services, that can actually alleviate some of the stress, because those teams know to expect that delay to be able to go, okay, we're in a regional platelet shortage. This is why we're prioritizing this, or our instruments down. So this is why things are slower. So that is one way to, don't be afraid to communicate. So thinking about it as like part of a culture, we are trained, like we've been saying, that to be precise and to be always to kind of be dependable, to be there for our patients. And so there's this unspoken expectation to handle things, even when resources are tight, that we've kind of alluded to already.
Right.
Yes. So I think like to that end, if we show up in the lab, we know what we're supposed to do. We know we're supposed to have the things that we need to. We know patient safety requires X, Y, Z, right? Materials. But maybe we don't have people or time to do it the way we know it should be done. I think that's kind of what you're hitting on, Erin, is like you're just constrained. So what tips would you give us, like, in order to handle that better, I guess? If you had tips, because you brought it up twice now, so I feel like you got some tips from there.
I mean, it's tough. I mean, you get stuck in this kind of like we've kind of alluded to the ethical tension around patient safety and around turnaround times, that you want to do what's right for the patient, but you're confounded sometimes by the system that's there. So don't be afraid to actually bring those suggestions forward. Like if you're the one doing the work, if they're doing a process improvement project or just in general, come to leadership, be a part of the solution going, I feel like we can do this better. I feel like if we take these steps to, instead of loading a coag on the line, if we actually just manually spin it, and if it's getting held up, then that's a way to kind of fast track it a little bit more. And we do go through those staffing and workflow compromises. So that's one way to be proactive about it. So usually when I work with students, I'm constantly just saying, you're a big part of that. What you're doing is impacting so many things down the line. And for them to see that light bulb moment where they realize they can have that impact on so much is a pretty big thing.
Yeah, I'll say, staffing is a big one. We're constantly making trade-offs between coverage and turnaround time and quality. But instead of blaming us people, let's look at our systems and let's not internalize things that are happening. We can look at what's failing and then really look at, okay, what is the system behind that made that fail? And so we had a particular system that I have in mind where during the holidays I was, doing a raffle, not a raffle because my institution doesn't like when we say that word raffle. It was a drawing for a free gift. It was a random drawing of names. And I was sending out the winners. It was 12 days of Christmas, so it was 12 winners a day. And many of our new employees on this email grouper were not getting the emails. And what we realized that the process that we had to add new employees to our, system-wide email for lab employees, which has like 400 people on it, something had broken and people weren't getting added to the email. Therefore, they weren't being notified by email when they won. And instead of pointing a finger at the one person we had designated to do this, we looked at our entire system for onboarding new employees and where can we add a checkpoint to say, before an employee comes on at the point where they get their email assigned to them, we will go ahead and assign this email to the lab grouper and just create a system rather than, diminishing a person or blaming a person. I don't know how burnout and moral injury shows up in your lab environments. I'd love to hear, the ways that you're kind of seeing stress pop up, or people just acting extra cranky when something's down, or people, spouting off how much work they do than another shift. I mean, those are all just kind of signs that either there's some level of fatigue or, like I said, moral injury in your laboratory and burnout. And those are all things that leaders might want to take a look at and make sure that, you're just paying extra attention to. Knowing the difference makes a big deal. But obviously, there's a workforce shortage out there. We want to make sure that retention, how we value our people and how we protect them from these things is being looked at.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think what I see a lot of just when I look at our institution and then beyond our institution is that there's a lot of frustration with feeling powerless in decision making when it comes to like system choices, right? And I'm sure you see that in your own, like lab is often an afterthought. And so you may have something big and fancy that you just did, and then you tacked lab onto it. We're like the afterthought, and then none of the needs for us were necessarily heard or done, right? So then you're going back to the drawing board, or you're frustrated and you're having conversations where people are like, isn't it awesome? And you're like, not really, not really awesome. Actually, it's not, because I can't do my job. But I'm glad that it's working out great for you, And so you see a lot of that, I think, in social media when it's like nurses versus pharmacy or pharmacy versus lab, or like, when people are kind of making fun of it, but it's really like, we laugh because it's true, but I think we also laugh because there's this sense of like helplessness to it, where it's like you either laugh or you get really angry and you leave, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of where it is. For me on the faculty side, it's interesting. I find myself like, because of communication barriers is where I get frustrated. So there's a gap between like what we do as faculty versus like what staff does, and then like understanding where they are and what they need, but then also like we're the ones that have to go tell the other physicians like what happened. And so sometimes when you have that gap of communication, the frustration is like, how did we get here? Like what happened? But then trying not to internalize the fact, like I feel really responsible when something impacts patients. Mm-hmm. Like when we messed up, or like anybody messes up, like if I mess up and it impacts a patient, like it's hard not to take that super personal anyway. I mean, I remember my first day in blood bank training as an MLS, like way back in the day, and I had an older battle axe senior, angel of a scientist, tell me like, you're going to kill someone in this department if you don't pay attention. Like, and I was like, oh, okay. Welcome to the lab. Like, I don't, but like that's instilled in us from day one. And so while I think it's hard, if your calibration's off or like something's off and like it could potentially affect a cut point for decision making in physicians, we take that very, very seriously. Yeah. Even if like the institution may say, well, like, oh, well, that's kind of minor because, in the whole clinical context, it's like, yes, I understand the clinical context that maybe didn't impact as much as we think. But like for my sense of ethics, right? My sense of practice, that's unacceptable to me personally. And that's really what we're talking about, right? It's like that internal struggle too, which may be different than really the external outcome or even the degree of outcome, but it's like internally it's so severe to us, right? And like, how do you triage that?
Yeah, and with burnout or just in general, like when you've worked 10 night shifts, it's real, and you're exhausted, it's really easy to lose track of what you're doing and why you're doing it. So one thing I usually try to do with newer people is where we'll go to accreditation rounds or we'll go to the safety huddles, and they can see how in those huddles they're impacting the surgery team, how they're impacting the different floors. And then luckily there's a children's hospital that we're affiliated with. So you can actually see, some of the parents walking their kids in. So it reminds you when you are exhausted and you have to cover 3 extra shifts of why you're doing it. So, and that's tough to keep. That why is hard to hold on to when you haven't slept as much as you need to, and there's only 3 of you on night shift and there should be 6.
Yeah. And when we kind of, look at, okay, practically, like I said, we don't want to just kind of be Debbie Downers here or just talk about the problem, but supportive leadership, whether you're a formal leader or informal leader in your lab, you have a title or not, means that you may not have all the tools or the language to fix everything, but you care enough to ask the questions and act where you can. And so if someone is listening right now and they are feeling worn out, or they are feeling like, man, I really want to make sure I do a good job in chemistry, but people just aren't, ordering supplies, and I'm always out and I'm always borrowing, and I can't get the turnaround time I need because we just don't have the systems in place. What would you tell them what would be one thing you would want to tell them that they could hear to help get over that hump, or just a piece of advice that they could practically use while they're working the bench and, on the front line?
Yeah, I would say just give yourself a little grace. You're not weak. You're working with kind of what you have, but continue to put all those turnaround times, all the testing you're doing is going to enable your strong laboratory leader to actually have data to go to the C-suite and justify more people. So if you've got so continue to support your strong leaders. You're not alone. You have your coworkers that are with you, your team members, but you've also got those strong leaders as well. So try to remember you are a part of a team, and that's going to help a lot. That you've got people, even if they're not directly in the lab, but there's other services as well. You're all here for one common cause.
Yeah, and you also have your network, right? So like, Stephan and I, we call each other, we call each other all the time. And sometimes the call is like, I feel girl. We say girl. That's how we start the call. Girl. Like I just got, and then we, at some point, one of us will say, oh, I just feel seen. That's all I needed. I needed somebody else to tell me I'm not crazy, because this is also going on in my life and in burnout. Like, that's the point of a network. That's the point of being in societies and meeting people and having people that you can lean on and say, like, I'm up against a wall and I don't know how to solve this. Like, help me. How did you solve it? And maybe they solved it and maybe they didn't, and you just sit together and, you know, sip tea, but like, at least like you got, you know, you have some, like an outlet, right? And then I would also say, you know, it's okay. It's okay to be the person who says we need a sustainable framework and to ask the tough questions and to say, you know, I understand we're rushed, but but slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right? To go back to that kind of like mentality, because we can just be rushed to one thing or the next. And it's okay to say, we're going to do this right. Okay. Like if we're going to do it, let's do it right. And to take those minutes, it means that you're caring. Because the temptation is you'll hear like, well, you're delaying care. Like, no, I'm not delaying care. I'm trying to give the best care. And so always coming back to that, the right care, the most accurate care is the best option, right? And so if that takes time, it takes time.
Yeah, I would say resilience isn't doing more. It's doing exactly what Dr. Nelson said. It's doing the sustainable thing, the thing that is scalable for people and for your laboratory and the profession. So you are essential, you matter, your tests matter, your team matters. My advice would be read Let Them by Mel Robbins. Because for any of the people problems, the culture problems that you have on your team, you know, we try to absorb that. We try to control everything that everybody is feeling or thinking. If people come to work grumpy or they're, you know, acting a different way, or this shift is acting a different way towards that shift, you can't control everybody else. You can only control how you respond. And that's why it's called responsibility. It's your ability to respond. And so I would say Let Them is required reading for all laboratory professionals. Focus on what you can control and let go of the rest.
And my friend Abby Kelly says this all the time, that it's not it's not an ability thing. You only have so much capacity. So I only have the capacity to do so much. You can only do so much. You're able to do so many amazing things, but you only have the capacity to do so many things in one moment. So,
all right. So if this episode resonated with you, share it with a colleague that needs to hear it, and let us know how you are grounding yourself in the, you know, the supportive breathing techniques or mental health techniques that you are using to keep yourself, you know, stable and grounded, and, you know, resilient against moral injury and burnout in your lab. And if you want to hear more from us, then let us know. And if you want to hear more tips from us, or if you got tips you want to share with each other, please put those in the comments on what helped you stay in medical laboratory science.